I feel like we had a pretty good introduction from Christy, but I will say I always appreciate just breathing in and out together. I feel like that calms my nerves. I know it calms Holly's nerves. So if you're anxious about anything today, let's just take some deep breaths together. Okay. Now breathe in. And let it go. And do it again. And let it go. Thank you for doing that with me. We're gonna open with a song that we've not done in a while, but it's one of our favorites. And I know it's Holly and I's favorites. I can't speak for you guys, but yeah, it's gonna lead us into Holly's message really well. So just encourage you all to open your hearts to it and hear it, and be ready to receive what Holly has to share with us. I don't know about you, but I like to tell the truth. The truth seems to change every Tuesday. And when I watch the news, man, it just gives me the blues. No one listens, just on a mission to hear their own voice. It's a wild world, we're all trying to find our place in it. It's a wild world and no one seems to understand it. It's a wild world, but there ain't no way I'm gonna quit it. Love is all we've got to give away. Some folks ain't got $1 to their name. Others got their own jet planes. We all have the same blood running through our veins. Whether or not you pray, black or white, straight or gay, you still deserve the love of your neighbor. It's a wild world, we're all trying to find our place in it. It's a wild world and no one seems to understand it. It's a wild world, but there ain't no way I'm gonna quit it. Love is all we've got to give away. Try a little tenderness, maybe some benefit of the doubt. Another person's point of view, try to listen and not to shout. Hold your opinions loosely, maybe you're not always right. Show a little mercy and hold on to love real tight. It's a wild world, we're all trying to find our place in it. It's a wild world and no one seems to understand it. It's a wild world, but there ain't no way I'm gonna quit it. Love is all we've got to give away. Love is all we've got to give away. Thank you all for singing that with us. I'm going to open us up in prayer before Holly takes the stage. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the beautiful weather the past few days. The sunshine's always great to feel on my skin. Thank you for allowing everybody to gather here safely tonight, and for each soul in this room. Every single one of them has a purpose, and today that is to commune with each other, and I am so grateful that everybody could be here. I just pray that everybody opens their hearts to hear what Holly has to say today, and that it speaks to them in the way that they need to hear it. In your name, amen.
Am I on? Can you hear me? I'm so uncomfortable with this microphone, you all. I like holding one because it makes me feel more safe, but this is fine. We've got this. Hello. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight. If you were here a little bit before service, Jeff and Sammy, I was like hysterically in tears because standing in front of you all is like the most intimidating thing in the world to me. But I'm honored to get to be up here. I actually honestly forgot that I was preaching this week, and so Christy and I have gone back and forth this week a couple times on just kind of where to start and what to talk about. And she kind of encouraged me to just like talk about something that I talk about a lot, something that just speak from the heart. And so I have an outline that I'm going to kind of sort of follow, but I'm just going to talk, and I hope that's okay with you all. So we're going to talk about the story today. Did anybody grow up singing the little Zacchaeus song when you were a kid? About him being a wee little man. Yeah, Jeff is like enthusiastically waving. So Christy suggested this story to me, and that's like the song that played in my head was Zacchaeus up in a tree, a sycamore tree. So we're gonna read this story, but we're gonna kind of talk about it through some different eyes today. So I want to read the verses. Actually, to read the verses, I have to have it pulled up. Scott, do you have it pulled up? It's on the screen. Okay. That's not the verse. Hold on, I do have it on my phone somewhere. Okay. Sorry, babe, I'm in Luke 19. You love me? Okay. There's always got to be something, you guys. Always, always, always. But my translation's being funny. Okay, there we go. All right, so I'm just going to read this. Jesus entered Jericho, and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. Guys, I feel that. Like, I've always loved Zacchaeus, even though I feel like I was always told his story almost in a negative light, and I've always loved it. Maybe that little part right there was like immediate kinship. Like, I get it. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him. Other reason I love Zacchaeus, like the man climbs trees, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." There we go. I'm honestly just going to kind of camp in the first 6 verses are what I really want to talk to you about, and we'll touch a little bit on the rest. But I remember singing this story in Sunday school, and I remember honestly having a lot of negative connotations towards this little man who was this tax collector who was called a sinner, and who climbed up in a tree. And it was perceived a lot of the time when I was told this story that like he's like hiding in this tree and he's living this horrible life, and he's thinking like, maybe just what if? And as I read his story this week, today actually, I just, my heart went out to this little man. He is someone who, I mean, we know in the Bible very little about him, but what we know about him is that he's short. So that was probably a huge disadvantage to him because the Bible named it. Like the fact that they named it means he was probably considerably short. We know that he's a tax collector. Now, our culture today, I think careers and job titles and things like that is not something we can grasp as much as like the significance of this career for this man. So most likely the fact that he's a tax collector means that he was born into a family where they had wealth, a family that they had, it was really hard to career climb back in the day. And I think we still have a degree of that. We still see a lot of those cycles, generational cycles of poverty, generational cycles of wealth. But he was someone he was a tax collector, whether that was he was born into wealth and he chose this career, or it was he was used to that. His father was a tax collector and he inherited that. But what we know about tax collectors is that he was not liked. He was someone that the community, his little village that he lived in, Jericho, they were not fond of him because he took their money. And so he was probably incredibly lonely. He had a lot of money, he had a lot of stuff, but he was someone who didn't have a lot of people in his world. We also know that he knows how to climb a tree. So my guess is that this human had decent health, enough that he could climb into a tree to get to see Jesus walking. And I would venture to say, and this is the thing that I think I really love about Zacchaeus. Well, I do love that he climbs trees, that him and I have a bond there, but he heard the stories about Jesus. And he was probably in a space in his world where he's in this career, where he's wealthy and he's successful and he's doing all these things, but he has something in his heart that's missing. And when he hears Jesus is coming, all it says in the Bible is that he wanted to see Jesus. It doesn't say he wanted to talk to Jesus. It doesn't say he wanted to go run up and hug Jesus. It says he wanted to see Jesus. And we know that as stories are passed down, and today they happen on social media, back then it happened by word of mouth, there was probably a piece of him that was like, maybe just seeing Jesus would do something for me. Maybe just seeing this man that does this miracle worker would do something. And so he enters the crowd of people, these people who have not liked him, and because he's so short, he can't see over the crowd. These people are probably not going to let him push through because he's not someone that they tend to like. And so the man is desperate enough that he climbs a tree. He climbs a tree just to lay eyes on Jesus. Now, what I really want to focus on is here you have this desperate man, maybe a crazy man. I'm not sure what the right verbiage is there. I want to talk about what Jesus did. Jesus, we know, was followed by crowds and crowds and crowds of people. So who was he to stop and acknowledge that there's a human sitting in a tree? He had so many people in front of him, people that are probably reaching out to touch him, hoping that when they touch his gown, it'll heal them. People that are like, hey, hug my child, or hey, hear me, say my name, please do something, or I just want to learn from you, I want to listen to you. Jesus stops, and he looks into the crowd to find this crazy little man that's sitting up in a tree. And he not only acknowledges Zacchaeus, he doesn't just say, hi, Zacchaeus. He doesn't just say, hey, why are you in a tree? He doesn't just say, hey, I see you. He says, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. And I don't know why I was told this Bible story as Jesus was frustrated with him, because I read these words and it sounds like, the invitation of someone who loves someone, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. This is probably one of my favorite stories in the Bible because Jesus freaking invites himself over for dinner. How fantastic is that? And I want to focus on that a little bit because you have Jesus while he is traveling. And I just want to point out, a lot of times we hear about people that are in successful businesses where they travel and they stay in hotels, and most of those are funded by their own bank accounts and their businesses, and most of them have worked really hard to get that. No, Jesus, he was funded literally by women who were the primary funder of his ministry to help him travel around to talk to people. It says over and over and over in the Gospels how he stayed at the house of other people who invited him in. Sometimes he slept on the dirt in the streets. Jesus was not wealthy. So Jesus was in a space where he couldn't just say, hey, Zacchaeus, I'm going to come cook you dinner. Zacchaeus, come over. And he didn't delegate. That's the other piece. He didn't say, hey, I'm going to come cook you dinner, because he didn't have a place to cook him dinner. He's in a different city. He also didn't delegate. He didn't say, hey, does somebody in this crowd want to invite us to dinner? And you get me, and can you please bring my friend with him? He doesn't say, hey, to the incredible person that's letting me sleep at your house tonight, can Zacchaeus come as well so we can talk? No, he says, Zacchaeus, I must come to your house today. This is so incredibly beautiful because what we see about Jesus, and I struggle sometimes with the focus on the miracles Jesus did, because I think that what actually happened was that Jesus met needs. It wasn't just, let's see the power of God. It was, you're suffering, let me help you. And like Christy preached an amazing message last week on Bartimaeus. And one of her big points that she brought over and over was like, Jesus asked Bartimaeus, what do you need? And he met that need. And in a time, in an era where there wasn't medicine, there wasn't the privileges that we have today, people were suffering at a whole different global level. You know, there was this amazing, incredible, miraculous thing. And that those miracles, I don't want to discount those, like those pointed to God. But Jesus was focused on meeting needs. He didn't say, hey, you're wealthy now. Hey, your house is bigger now. Hey, you know, you are driving a Flintstone car or Chariot or whatever you're driving around in those time and age. Like, no, Jesus was like, you're sick, I'm gonna make you better. You're hungry, I'm gonna feed you. You're sad, I'm gonna weep with you. I'm gonna hold you. Your brother has passed away. I'm gonna raise him from the dead because you need him, or you miss him. Like, Jesus met needs. And Jesus looks at Zacchaeus, this wee little man sitting in a tree who has a house and he has money and he has all the things, and he has health because he's climbing into a tree, so he must have been physically at least decently well. But Jesus saw in him that he needed connection. Jesus saw in him that he needed relationship. He didn't just say, hey, Zacchaeus, I see you. He said, I'm gonna go spend time with you. And to me, that just, it hits me different because the fact that that need is up there on the scale of Maslow's hierarchies of need, of food and shelter and healing and health and all those pieces is so incredibly beautiful. And so they go to Jesus's house. And often this image, I Googled it, like this image is so often seen in scripture as like Jesus is literally sitting at one of those like floor tables. I wish we could bring those back. I think they're fantastic. And he's having a meal with Zacchaeus. They're talking. And Jesus is listening to him. Meals are something in scripture that, and still holds true today, are an incredibly vulnerable and intimate experience to share with somebody. Meals allow us, when we eat together, it allows us to engage in conversation and relationship. Meals allow us to eat one of our most basic needs of survival, which is to have nourishment. And when we are being nourished, when our body is taking in food and digesting it, our parasympathetic nervous system is activated, which means we relax. It means that we're not in our fight and flight response. If you're activated, if you are stressed out, if you're scared, you're not going to be hungry, and that food isn't going to sit well with you. So when you are eating a meal together and you're enjoying space together, you are relaxed and you are at probably your most authentic self. Does anybody else get hangry in here besides me? Christy has a kid who we also say anxious because he is like, okay, I just had breakfast. Now, when are we having lunch and what are we going to have? He now cooks for everybody, which is fantastic. So I think that's probably born out of his anxiousness. But food is one of those things that like, it drives us as humans. So when we engage in sharing a meal with someone, that is an incredibly sacred and intimate space. That is one of the reasons that we do meals before we hang out here together. And it's one of the reasons we tell people, like, you don't have to stay for this, just come for the meal. Come and have what we call communion. Communion is like this huge religious word that a lot of people look at as the wine or the grape juice nowadays and the plastic cup with the little wafer. And really what communion was a meal shared at a table together in relationship. And that's why we do communion every service on Saturdays over watermelon that looks like baby turtles or footballs. I don't know what you said, Jeff. He did the cutting of that. And the meals that Christy, every single week, I don't know if y'all know this, but Christy cooks these meals or warms them up and preps them and organizes them. And I think it's one of the most beautiful things she does for all of us, because as our pastor, it'd be really easy to be like, hey, I'm going to delegate this to somebody else, but she's the one that makes sure that everybody gets fed. And I think that's one of the most compassionate and beautiful things that you do. So thank you. And then she sits down and eats with us. And that just models this beautiful interaction that we see that is so biblical. This sharing of a meal in Zacchaeus' own home was probably the most intimate way Jesus built a relationship with him and showed him that, Zacchaeus, you are worthy of relationship. You are not just worthy of having your needs met, you are worthy of relationship. Having people in your own home is also a space that oftentimes our homes are like the most authentic version of ourselves. When you come into our home, my home is where I have, and I use the word home loosely because it can mean your bedroom, it can mean your nook of the streets or the woods where you stay. It's this place that you say is my safe space. And when you invite someone into that safe space, that sacred space, it means you trust that person. Because that is something we all, and that's a very animal-like tendency that we have. It's a very natural tendency to have a place that's ours. And that's why when we don't have that place, it's so incredibly disruptive. But our houses are often, our homes, our safe places are often, they're messy. They are where we cry. They're where we fall apart. They're where some of our biggest secrets sometimes come to light. And so the fact that Jesus not only shared a meal with him, but came to him and said, hey, I'm going to hang out in your home, showed him also that you are worthy exactly where you're at in your mess. You are worthy as you are. I can guarantee you that Zacchaeus didn't run ahead and clean his house. I can guarantee you that Zacchaeus didn't try to put everything in order and make sure that the house smelled good and, dusted all the little leaves out or whatever. The third thing that Jesus did is that in that moment, he saw Zacchaeus as more than a short tax collector in a tree. I'm going to point out the tree thing as much as possible because I love that part of the story. But he saw Zacchaeus as more than a tax collector. He saw Zacchaeus as this human who had potential. While the rest of the city looked at Zacchaeus and said, you're a sinner, is actually the language that's used. You're a sinner. Like, you're taking my money. I see you in the street and I literally turn and run the other way. A lot of people probably saw him as someone who took from them what their basic necessities were because they had to pay taxes sometimes before eating. It also says in here how Zacchaeus he would often rob people, so he would take his own share of it. So he was known as a thief. He was known as someone who cushioned his own pockets. And Jesus didn't wait for Zacchaeus to have a heart change. Jesus saw him and saw his potential and saw him in the tree, desperate for a relationship, and he said, hey, I'm coming to your house, I'm going to hang out with you. I don't know Zacchaeus' story. They don't really tell us a whole lot about Zacchaeus' story. Like I said, we probably assume he was born into wealth. He may have been born into a family who had a career of tax collecting. That would have been his dad, because women weren't allowed to work back then, which was crazy. But we don't know if there was grief or loss in his life. We don't know if there had been a marriage to a woman and maybe she had died. We don't know if he had just been lonely his entire life. We don't know if he was even attracted to women. Like, we don't know anything about this man. But the fact that this man was desperate enough to see Jesus shows something in him that was harmed, that was hurt. We don't know if his dad was nice to him, that his mom was nice to him. He could have been a survivor of child abuse. These things aren't given to us. But so often, and this is so true of our culture today, we look at someone and we say tax collector. We see homeless. We see queer. We see lawyer, judge. Like, we see these terminologies, and I'm intentionally not just focusing on the marginalized titles, because we so often suffer in those populations of being named an addict, a single parent, someone living on welfare, homeless, like those terminologies that are so harmful, those labels that are so harmful to us. But on the other side of that, we see people who we look at, that the world looks at, and they're a lawyer, they're a judge, they're wealthy. And those labels can be just as damaging. Those individuals can have just as much harm in their life and trauma in their life, and they can be just as much in a box. And it's different. Those boxes are incredibly different, so hear my heart about that. But Jesus saw someone who was wealthy, and he saw someone who didn't have any of these physical needs that we see in so many of these Bible stories, and he said, you are more than a tax collector, you are more than a thief, and I'm gonna come and I'm gonna have dinner with you at your house. And I don't know if that moves you the way it moves me, but that is so beautiful. That is so sacred. And what's crazy is because in those final verses, even when all the rumblings that followed where Jesus is going to go have dinner at a sinner's house. Like, he's going to go hang out with this sinner, this thief, this tax collector, like all the whispers and stuff like that. It didn't take Jesus sitting down and having dinner for Zacchaeus to say, something's going to change in me. Jesus' invitation, Jesus' acknowledgement of Zacchaeus, Jesus' acknowledgement of you deserve relationship moved Zacchaeus to compassion. And Zacchaeus is immediately saying, what can I do to give back? And he immediately starts listing, I'm gonna give my possessions away, half of my possessions. I'm gonna give my money away. Like, he was moved by that invitation. He was moved to compassion. A couple of takeaways that I just really wanna point out. You guys, presence matters. Our presence in relationships matters with the people that we have a chance to do life with. Jesus doesn't say a whole lot in this little piece of scripture. We're talking about the red letters of Jesus, and I picked a passage, Christy actually helped me pick this passage, that doesn't have a lot of red letters in it. Literally all Jesus really says in this, except at the very end, but the point of the story before the end is this. He just says, hey, come down immediately. I'm going to come to your house. Those are the red letters. The action of Jesus' presence and relationship with Zacchaeus is what matters. We don't have to, when we are doing life with someone, when we meet someone, we don't always have to know what we need to say. We don't have to know what's going to help fix what they need. We don't have to have the answers. How many of you have ever been in a situation where you're like, I feel for you, but I have no idea how to help you. I have no idea what to say to you. And so many times our humanness is to either pull away from that, or our humanness is to delegate that. It is really easy to say, I can't help you, but I want you to meet so-and-so. And that's not necessarily bad. So many times that can be a really helpful thing to do. But most of the time, there is a process in between those two spaces, that there is this huge need that humans, each and every single human, I don't care what you've been through, I don't care what title, I don't care what your pronouns are, every human on this planet has a need for connection. And we may have wounds that make us think that we don't need connection, but every single human on this planet has a desire to be seen, to be listened to be heard, to be validated, and to be loved. And I can guarantee for most of you, if someone says, I want to take you to lunch, I want to come hang out with you, there's a little piece in our heart that skips a beat and says, really? You want to listen to me? You want to share a meal with me? Our presence matters oftentimes more than our words do. And I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that sitting with someone and saying, I don't know what to say, I'm probably not going to say the right thing, I don't know how to help, but I'm here, that can be more life-changing than you coming to them and saying, okay, here's the number to call, and here's where we're going to go, and this is these things. Like, yes, those things matter. But sitting in that space and saying, I'm here, that can be life-changing. The other piece that I want to point out is that we often, and this is kind of speaking to, if you have grown up in religion or you've been around it, so much of Christianity speaks to these words of saving and salvation. And I think sometimes when you're immersed in a world where you have this mindset that says, I have to be saved, sometimes we take on this responsibility, then I must save other people. And saving someone is a huge, intimidating responsibility. And it's honestly this mindset in us that I think can be really harmful because it often pushes us away from people. Because it's like, I am not qualified. I don't have what you need. I don't know what to say. Most of us are probably familiar with how so often in the Bible we talk about Jesus saving and saving on the cross and some of that language. And I'm not going to get into that. But Jesus spent years in ministry before the cross, before all of those stories that we know so well. And he spent those years in relationship with people. He spent those years spending time with people. He spent those years knowing people's names. And so I want to encourage you And I want to challenge you that our presence matters, and there is nothing that disqualifies you from making a difference. And there is no expectation on you that Jesus has put on you, that the church has put on you, that this culture has put on you, that you have to do, say, be the right thing. For goodness sakes, what we need to do better, and what that end of that song, one reason, listen, I love that song so much, is we just have a little love to give. Just a little time, a little energy. That can name the world. And I also want to challenge that most of us in this room have probably been the recipient of that presence that someone has given to us, has taken time to be with us. And if I ask you right now, you would probably have a moment, someone in your life, a teacher who sat down with you after school and talked to you, someone who found you on the street and stopped and listened to your story, someone who took you to coffee or to lunch and just wanted to get to know you. I see fingers pointing. There's people in this room. We don't have to reach a certain level, to be that person for someone else. So, the next time you see a weird little man in a tree, but maybe, I invite you to be brave enough to say, hi, come down from the tree, or come over here, or can I come sit next to you? And to just be. Just be. And I promise you, in that moment, you are enough. So, now that I'm all emotional, that's not surprising to anyone in this room. Thanks, guys. Liz and I were struggling with music because I couldn't find a good fit for this song, for this end of this. And Liz recommended an incredibly well-known favorite song from the movie Toy Story, You've Got a Friend in Me. So we're gonna sing it, and I'm gonna invite you to sing it with us, because I want to highlight and wrap this all together that probably one of the most sacred things that we can do as humans is to be somebody's friend. And so as you all drive home tonight, or walk home, or get shuttled home, I know this song will probably be playing in your head, and maybe this will inspire you to keep loving out loud, and to look for short men in trees. Just kidding. We also have kiddos that have come down because it's Toy Story, so if they want to come up here, they can dance or they can sing along, whatever they want to do. Oh, sorry guys.
You've got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me. When the road looks rough ahead and you're miles and miles from a nice warm bed, you just remember what your old pal said. Yeah, you've got a friend in me. Yeah, you've got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me. You got troubles, I've got them too. There isn't anything I wouldn't do for you. We stick together and see it through, 'cause you've got a friend in me. Yeah, you've got a friend in me. Yeah, you've got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me. Applaud our dancers. It's very good. Well, I just wanted to say, I was sitting there thinking at the end of Holly's sermon how I feel like TCG is a very good representation of what it's like to just come together and be messy and be with each other. And that doesn't necessarily have to be like, hey, let's talk about Jesus. It's just like, let's just be people together. And that's my favorite part of coming here. And thank you for your words. Yeah, eat food. Tomorrow come to the, well, if you're 18 or 25, come to the bowling thing. I'm looking at you guys because I think you missed that. Would love to see you. Yeah. Thanks, guys. We love you.